check, yeah.
Mike is good? Good. Welcome to the select board meeting for Wednesday, October 11th. Called to order at 7 p.m. First topic on the agenda is review of the VE8 119 road salt contract MOU. I used this MOU last year for the snow season. Generally, the awarded company changed for one of them. Morton and Eastern last year, and this year it's both. Question is there any questions, concerns, or are we good continuing with?
The only question I had, and just for clarification, is on page 2, road salt information. It says our average ton, 5-year average, estimated 2024, 100, and it's salt 175. I'm just confirming that we are committing to 375, which is 25 over our average, and not what our average is.
Mr. McCrory, would you mind coming up to the mic and just... Yes, if you have a question, please come up to the mic. Thank you.
I apologize. I had a question about the salt bid in the amounts. On page 2, our average usage was 350 pounds, and it shows the estimated 2024 was 200, but there is treated salt underneath at 175, and I just want to confirm the amount that we're... Thank you for the clarification.
Any further questions?
Concerns?
I'll make a motion. Go ahead. Amend down. I'll make a motion that we use the statewide contract VEH 119 for road salt and engage in the memorandum of understanding and further authorize Glenn McCrory, superintendent, to sign any and all documents related. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, with that, it is 7:01, so I will call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee, the Capital Planning Committee, and the School Committee to order. Our topic for tonight is the proposed FY24 Prop 2.5 override information session. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. We really wanted to take this time to hear from the citizens and answer any questions about what this is, what we're trying to do with it, why we're bringing it, etc. We have an informational packet that you all have in front of you. There's a brief letter in the opening that talks about how we got here as the collective boards and committees and department heads and all those in town government who helped to get to this point. Some glossary of terms in here to help understanding some of this complex levy information, and then information about our levy limit for the year, and then the impact sheet on estimated what the tax impact of the override will be if it is approved at special town meeting and at the ballot. And then some information about the various areas that that money is adding up toward. So with that, I'll just ask if anyone else on the boards or committees wants to say anything before we just open it up for questions. So we'll open it up for a public question, and I would just ask that you come up to the microphone in the front here, and please just state your name for the record before you ask your question. Please.
We're okay.
So yes, in effect, it would both be executing the 2.5 override for that total dollar amount allocated to those various budgets and departments that are listed per the special town meeting warrant. So it would be doing both at the same time. This is a forum to ask about it and understand it and talk through it, yes. At the STM, you will be voting on each one of them because each one of them is a separate budget that has to be allocated and approved independently. The cumulative of all of the articles related to the override add up to the total override amount that is shown in the information.
Over.
We can go through a high-level overview of that, definitely.
People want it.
Sure.
I think it's to everybody's benefit. Otherwise, Christian, otherwise you're going to get a no. We need to know the why. And why wasn't this the original?
All right, so hopefully this will pick up the voice. I'll try and project because ours isn't mic'd out into the audience. There it is. Thank you. We'll do our best. So I'll just run down through inside your packet. If you open it up to the middle fold, that's where it starts with the brief overview of each departmental section that we talked about since we started this back in right after annual town meeting, late May, early June, knowing that we were going to be in this position. So I'm just going to go down through, and there's little snippets of information in each one of them, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those are and why those are in there. So the assessor's office, $145,000. We had decreased, each year we put a certain amount of money into the overlay, which allows the assessors to have a pool of money should they need to do appellate tax board issues, if they have to have relief for somebody, if there's a reduction in taxes. They have a pot of money to work with that to be able to address those issues
And so it allows anything at the assessor's office. Jackie, you can jump up if there's anything else that you need in there. But also legal fees. The assessor's office have been working extensively with attorneys over it. They have a lot of active appellate tax board cases happening. There's a lot of activity out of that office. So they are needing to increase their amount in that line item. Jackie, did you have anything else you wanted to add to?
No, but if anybody has any questions, I'm here. So the the bulk of it, the $100,000, was what we cut from our overlay request, which would help fund the refund if we were to lose the case. The other amount was for legal fees to help pay for the case that I was in Boston for a week, 2 weeks last week to make it happen, but it's still, we have to pay the bills and there's still ongoing legal costs. This is to supplement that budget. So that's what my request is for. Hopefully within 6 months. This is for years 19, 20, 21, and 22. I am hopeful, yes.
Any other questions? No? All right. So somebody just brought up a good point. So the reason we started to address this is that on the floor, when we amended and then finally approved at annual town meeting the FY24 budget, we knew looking at that budget that there were going to be shortfalls. There was close to $1 million in cuts in order to balance that budget to bring it forward. So we knew going into it that we were cutting services, cutting ability to fund the way we wanted to or needed to, that we're accustomed to. And that was accentuated when we had to make some on-the-floor changes in order to balance it that evening. So we knew right away that the FY24, while it's balanced, was not a budget that we could stand behind and say that it was sustainable for what we need. So that's what prompted us to continue to look at it and look at all of these line items and departments and the cuts that were made throughout the entire FY24 budget season, and then again on the floor to balance it. So that's what we're addressing, is those cuts. There are a couple of requests that were not cuts, but we had also asked all departments, we want you to look for the next 5 years forward, because we don't want to find ourselves that we're asking for 1.3 million and we're just a couple $100,000 short, and then find out in FY26, just 2 years from now, that man, we just, we don't have enough funds again. So we were looking at trying to do a 5-year window of what are some things that your office needs that you've had in the works, but we just haven't had the ability to do, that we've put off for a little bit of time. So that's how the conversation spurred on, just for background. Administration. So I'll speak to that one a little bit. So it's the creation of an assistant town administrator position. Several years ago, we brought Mariah on board, and then subsequently we realized that our town does a ton of projects, and we really needed a full-time planner. So we ended up taking our what we had hired as an assistant to work with our town administrator and do a lot of the heavy lifting and share that burden inside that office. We hired, and then a couple years later, lateral moved out. So we are looking to backfill and create that assistant position within the Board of Selectmen's office under Town Administrator Smith to make sure that we can cover all of those needs. If you saw our email chains, that sometimes we're getting responses to emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, for somebody who's working 80, 90 plus hours a week in order to make sure that everything is done in a timely manner. We felt it was unfair to continue to ask somebody to burn themselves out at that level. And we have finally gotten to a point where we said, if we're going to do an override, if we're going to ask the voters to do an override, we need to backfill a position that is desperately needed. So that's where that line item comes in. I'll take any questions on that one. So community planning, you'll see a $5,000 line item request. That request came through. We had cut it down by 5,000. It's for land surveying and road and property projects, and that's outside of your highway road improvement. These are other small projects that comes up, and we need to do a little bit of survey to find meets and bounds and move a project along. So we need to have those funds available to be able to do that. We were a little bit short, and we said, well, we can cut it to balance it, and then maybe we just won't be able to, fund some of those. We'll have to push them out for another year. This was our opportunity to put that $5,000 back in to ensure that we have the funds for the surveying. If I don't see any hands jump up or anybody going to the mic, I'm just going to continue moving on. So Finance Committee, this is a new line item that was not there before. This has been floated around for a couple of years. Talked about Mariah's is very advantageous about going out and getting a ton of grant funds for our town. With that brings a lot of projects that we do, but a ton of free money, a ton of grant money. Some of those require matching funds. And oftentimes we find ourselves in a quandary of we don't have funds allocated to do that, so we have to set up a meeting, find the time, find the line item, see where we can pull it from, do we have it available? So what we'd like to do is have a line item, and I believe we talked about a revolving account, or special article, special article, so that it can remain year to year. We'll upfront load it with $25,000. If we don't use it, it sits. If we applying for a grant that needs $5,000 match grant, we have a line item for it. We decide whether or not we want to replenish that $5,000 at the end of the year going to the next year. That could be from free cash, that could be from raise and appropriate. We get to look at that of how we want to put funds back into that article, so that we have a one-time fund that can go up and down as we see fit, in order to match the type of work that we're doing and the grants that are coming our way. If you could come up to the mic, because we don't do an attendance sheet, and just say your name so that we know who you are for the record. Thank you.
Right now, what are you looking?
All right, I would ask, I'm going to lean on our town planner to, who's got the whole running list for that one.
So right now, we have a grant that we're working on that has paid for 2 culvert replacements on Lillian's Way. We just finished up that construction project and we're closing that out right now. We had a grant that did the Paper Mill Road sewer pump station that we closed out this year. And then in terms of upcoming grants that we have going on, we've got one that I'm looking at to submit maybe through the winter on doing a feasibility study on a bike path going from Irving Center to Farley. I'm sure that I'm missing others that we're going to be looking at. We're a part of a lot of, once you do like a study, you're allowed to then apply for funds. And so each year I kind of look at what our upcoming projects are and how they match with different funds that are out there that we're eligible for. And then we kind of mix and match as we can. Oh, yeah, and we're waiting to hear back on a grant application that I submitted to pay for the Swamp Road Bridge repairs. To pay for the Swamp Road Bridge repair or replacement. Yeah, we should hear back from that any moment. Church wasn't a grant.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
well, it's a lot of work then.
we also got some MassDOT money, hopefully, to put in the church the Church Street Bridge replacement. So I guess technically not a grant, but it's state money that we got to replace that. No, so it would be, you know, where you go over the tiny bridge in Riverfront Park to that old road. So it would be restoring that basically to a bike path that would connect Farley to Riverfront Park and then potentially Riverfront Park to Wendell Depot. Yeah, right now you can kind of walk it, but there's some kind of muddy spots and it's kind of, you know, a lot of brush. So this would be looking at whether we could, you know, clear that out, add gravel, where each terminus would be, you know, that we'd have to work with some private property owners, but most of that is owned by DCR. And so there's a grant program where they can pay for you to do like a full study on what the total cost would be and talk with neighbors about whether they're interested in partnering on it and things like that. Yeah, so they've been right. They've been supportive of that. Was there another question over there? Oh, okay.
Great questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mariah. Moving on to the public safety, in the police department, it was $75,000. There were some operational cuts. There was cuts to building maintenance. There was cuts to anticipated electrical costs. There was just various, you know, 1,000 here, 500 there. We tried to reinstate those. The big bulk of that is hiring or starting a program that the chief had wanted. He brought it back. He brought it forward for us. We had it in the plan for FY24, but ultimately had to cut it. It's a cadet program, and I'll give some background on that. The reason we want to do a cadet program in the town of Irving is we're finding with police reform that finding people that have full-time academy training or the post-training that are out there as viable candidates that want to apply and come into the town of Irving, they're not as plentiful as they used to be. And the pool is ever shrinking. There's a lot of demands on law enforcement in order to get into the field. So what we're hoping to do is be able to have somebody come in as a cadet. They don't need the training. They can get on-the-job training. They come in. It's at a lower rate, but they do various tasks. They take various classes. They do some trainings. They do all the ride-alongs. They work up through all of that. They're a viable staff member that can do everything but be out on patrol by themselves and do the work until they can get into a full-time academy, get that training, and then become one of our officers. So what we'd hopefully be doing is we have a minimum staffing that we try and strive for of 6 officers, inclusive of the chief. We don't always meet that, but we would hope that this would be a 7th person. This would be the cadet. And when they are full-time, if it puts us at a 7th, it's there. But when somebody leaves, we automatically are at our our optimal staffing of 6. So it's allowing us to keep people coming in that maybe they're the perfect fit, but they just don't have the training. You know, they have the desire to do the position, they want to do the position, they're, for whatever reason, we would hire them, but they can't fulfill the role of a police officer without the training. This allows us to get them on that track from internally. The other portion of that is the academies. As you bring in new officers, even some that come from other departments, they may not have yet completed the full-time academy or post requirement trainings. So, you know, there's oftentimes we spend it's around $15,000, $12,000 to $15,000 to send somebody to a full-time academy. And with the turnover that we've seen, you know, you can send 1 a year, sometimes in bad years 2 a year, to get people up to train, full status, and back out on the road. So that's where that 75. It's a combination of having enough funds to augment what's in our line items for academies, training purposes, operating expenses, and the cadet program.
So in that program, those officers, or after we send them to school and pick back?
So that question was brought up at one of our last meetings when we were discussing this. You know, Currently, we can, it's a public document that anybody can request, but the contract does say that there's, a prorated option of if somebody, it's the value of whatever the full-time academy is, broken down over 3 years. And so they take the 36 months and it's done monthly. If they leave before the 3 years of commitment, we can ask for reimbursement based on the prorated for how long they were here. So it doesn't guarantee a lifetime of career in Irving, but it does ask for some commitment to stay with the town. No, we can't stop anybody from coming through, getting training, and if I don't have exact numbers. I don't believe Chief's here. It's quite, yeah, it's quite frequent. I mean, I'd say in the last 10 years, half of the people that come in have left. And it's, and a lot of them will look to go, they'll relocate to hometowns where they were. They'll relocate for really large departments that have so many options of canine and detective bureaus and so many things that we just can't offer as a small town, nor can any of the communities in the Franklin County or, surrounding areas. So that's what we face. And so we're hoping you do find, by bringing somebody in brand new, that with the training, there's a hope that there's some desire to stay because they were there from the ground up. They got their training there and they got their feet dug in there. And then we find more people that have worked for a long time that came over part-time, got the training with 10 years of experience, not as easy to retain. That's just the historical nature of how it happens.
I'd just like to add one piece to that is prior to police reform and the post standards that have been implemented, the way that a lot of officers were recruited was through reserve intermittent academies, which was a lower academy, but it allowed officers to come in and work on a part-time basis. The police reform standards have eliminated that part-time reserve intermittent status. So any and all new officers need to be full-time. I speak to that. That's how I originally started working here for Irving PD and was a part-time reserve for 10 years before I came over full-time. And that's how the department historically found and recruited members. But that's no longer an option, so the cadet program would be the alternative to that.
No other questions? I'll move on to the fire department. You'll see a creation of a new position. So Chief Wonka came to us and talked about one of the requirements that are put upon municipalities and fire departments now. It's a rule called 2 in, 2 out. When you're addressing a structure fire or any, fire emergency, the ideal numbers that you need to have in order to actively go inside of a building is 2 go in and 2 stay out. We have 3 members on our department. So what happens is you can show up and while you're waiting for a call member to show up or waiting for mutual aid to show up at the scene, you can work from the outside. There are certain things you can do, but you cannot address anything on the interior until you have that 4th person, so you can have 2 people outside. And it's just one of the requirements. So sometimes, a few minutes can mean a lot. And so one of the things we wanted to do, this request was to allow us to give a 4th person for the department so that when they are here, it gives them one more opportunity to ensure that they have 4 people to respond. Now, does that mean that people are never going to take a day off? No, they take days off now. So, they're entitled to vacation. They're entitled to, personal time and their time away. But this just augments it enough to alleviate some of those concerns for when they could have been able to respond with 4 people and get right into a structure and head right in the building. I know Chief's here. He may, if he has any concerns or if you have any questions, I'm sure he'll jump up to answer. So we'll get down to the benefits, but no, that's the salary. Benefits are on their own line item, and we'll talk of, yeah, it's a piece of all of them, yeah. Hearing none other. The Highway Department, you can see that it talks about restoring FY24 operational cuts and the creation of a new position. The new position is custodian position. We had some movement and structural changes within the departments of the highway and grounds, moving things around, and it created a vacancy in a position. And we had promotions within all of those. So there's one position that needs to be filled, and that's a custodian position. This puts the funding back in that line item for that. It also, there's additional surveying that the highway does when they're talking about road reconstructions. Oftentimes, we have gotten away from the idea that we just scratch down a road surface, throw some asphalt on it, and move on. Several years back, we went into complete streets. And so what we want to do is we go through communities groups at a time, or groups of streets. We look at everything. We survey everything. We look at sidewalks, signage, road widths, road layouts, drainage, pitch, all of that. So that when we fix it once, and hopefully for the next 20, 30 years, maybe we do have the ability to go back and just scratch coat here and there as needed when the asphalt gives out. But you're working with an up-to-date, new standard structure. So that's where some of the surveying comes from. And like I said, the operating, all of the departments, when they heard that there was cuts, were looking at, $500 here, $1,000 there of different operating costs. Some of that came out of utilities, some of that came out of materials, just anything they could cut to try and show in good faith that they were making cuts out of their budget. And so we went back through those cuts that we saw and said, do we need to reinstate this one? Do we not? Some we did, some we didn't. But that's the totality of all of those pieces. Yeah, I apologize. The notation inside the printout was missing for some of the items. So the wastewater department, we worked with our superintendent in water, wastewater. There were various line items that needed to be addressed. Fuel, and we all know how fuel has gone up. Fuel is expensive. So the fuel purchase was going to create a deficit. Testing, chemicals, and sludge disposal. That cost is not going down. Every time we have our, sludge removed and has to be hauled off to another location to dispose of, that cost has been escalating. So our superintendent went down through and looked at several years' history of the projections of where it's going and what it's going to cost to fill fuel tanks, all of that, and that's where we came up with $39,000. Some of the testing, I think the superintendent's here, but some of the testing is new. It's new requirements that we have to do. So these were recently implemented that we didn't see in years past. And so it's a line item that doesn't even exist to this day, but we're creating it and adding it to it. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, it's yours. Sorry. For the senior and community center, $5,000. Our director had recently been, we had hired a new programs coordinator. And unfortunately, with the funding at the level it was, there weren't a lot of programs that coordinator could coordinate. so for $5,000, I think the average program that's run at the community center, senior center can run from 3 to 7, but I'd say it's around $500 a program. And so this allows the senior center to be able to access enough funds to stay active. Our senior center is probably one of the most active that in the area, with the number of attendees, the number of opportunities that people have. We have people coming from all over to take advantage of what we offer, coordinating with LifePath, with meals, medical services through the regional nursing. I mean, it's runs the gamut of things they offer. This was the piece that was lacking, was to be able to bolster up the activities and the programs that will engage the patrons that go there. So that line item increases that to ensure that with more people, we can offer more services, more programming, so that we don't have to set limits on how many people or diminish the number of opportunities, because the desire is there and the demand is there. Anything else, Paula? All right. So the public library, $25,000. The bulk of that is the creation of a new position. It's a part-time position. It is to ensure that they can have optimal staffing inside the building. The way the building's set up, you don't always have, if you have just one person in the building, you don't have line of sight, you don't have the ability to engage with the patrons. So the ability to have two people in the building and operate the building safely and appropriately requires one more part-time person. We have a working director, we have, and several assistants, we have a librarian in there. So this is one more, I think 19 hours a week. Somebody can correct me. Oh, it's only 14, okay. So it's a 14-hour position in order to fill those voids that we have. And Abby, I see you stood up. If you want to come and give a more thorough, or if people have questions, I may call on you in a second. And so it's also increased programming. So we want to make sure that we offer, it's not just having reading materials there, it's having programs for patrons of all ages. So we do a lot of children's programming, teens, we're trying to bolster that up. There is, it runs the gamut, adult nights, anybody that attends the library and utilizes that will tell you that there's quite a bit, and this allows us to keep bolstering that up and keep growing that. There's one of the requirements, you don't see it in here, but there is the 20% match. So the state requires us, whatever your budget is, 20% of it has to be dedicated to materials. So the request came in at a certain amount, and then we had to add another 20% to that to put it in that line item for materials, and that's just to make sure that we stay within the regulations of the state. If you could come to the mic and just let everybody at home know who you are. Thank you. Oh, yes. So the question was, has there been an increase in patrons and usage of the library?
Hi. Really loud. Okay. Sorry, Abigail Baines, Library Director. And the participation numbers, we can tell you that the participation in the building, we've counted building access, and the past 2 years it's doubled. So that's pretty good, right? Yeah. Yeah, so we had about, so FY23 numbers are over 8,000 patrons. FY22 numbers were around 4,000 patrons. And that's the annual count. And that's run by 3 staff right now. Yeah, thank you for your question.
There's no other questions on the library. I believe the next one is health insurance. So this was this was done over several meetings. I know Chairman Smith's over here trying to take notes of how we got there. During the joint meetings and meetings with the department heads and meeting with our treasurer, tried to figure out exactly how many employees were not allocated for in the current FY24 estimation for benefits, should they be hired. So in the best effort of making sure we're not increasing the line item exponentially just because, over the years we've tried to only, if a position went vacant for 2 years, we didn't hold a place value for that of, you know, $21,000 or $22,000 forever. So if we didn't think the position was going to be filled, it would just get dropped off of that equation, so we could sort of keep to a level funding and keep things going. So this number represents, yeah, you have the list in front of you. There you go. I'm going to hand it off.
Thank you, Scott. So yeah, I have the list here, and our treasurer can expand on that more if there's questions, but this is the information that went into the decision. It's not the exact formula. Couple things we started and cut the requested increase to that line in the FY24 budget. So the current approved budget had no increase year over year in the funding, because that was part of the cuts to balance the budget. The actual costs did go up, and I don't remember the percentage, but it was around what we had originally been requested. So we, out of the gate, were already behind from that standpoint. And then to kind of elaborate on the positions that hadn't been filled in more than a year weren't in the calculation, and it's an estimate. So today, what we have for positions that are planned, proposed in the override, or we're actively recruiting for right now that may need benefit coverage. We have 8 non-school and 9 school. So for the school, we have a van driver, we have 4 paras, a librarian, pre-K teacher, ELL teacher, adjustment counselor. So all of those, if filled, are not planned for benefits. There's a couple of them that were expected, but most of those are positions that were not filled last year, and would potentially require benefits that are not in the budget. And then on the rest of the town, we have a couple police officers currently. We have the potential additional firefighter, the additional custodian position, highway operator position that's open, the assistant town admin proposed, the police department cadet, and then also we didn't touch on it earlier, but proposal for an assistant assessor as we are, you know, headed towards a change in that staffing in future years here to ensure continuity. So all there, we've got about 17 different positions, and when we look at the actual numbers today, and potentially up to 17 of those that could have benefits this year, there isn't funding for all of that. There's just funding barely for the increased cost and the current active participants. So positions that are in the budget in departments, the benefits, we don't have them because of the cuts that we made. And on average, full benefits is under 22,000, so we use about 22,000 as a full benefit placeholder per individual. I'm going to restate what I think I heard, confirm if I get it right, and then I might lean on our treasurer for part of that answer. The approved benefit line from the annual town meeting did not incorporate a handful of positions that are proposed in the override, as well as a handful of positions that were in the school budget, some that had been in prior years but not filled, and then others that were part of the increased budget that was approved on the town floor. That was not obviously calculated in the benefit line. So, okay. And the 1.8 number or not, I will lean on the treasurer if that's right. I don't have that in front of me. So can I ask that we do this on the microphones because neither of you are getting picked up? So the question was about what goes into the 1.8 million benefit line versus this 350 that's specifically health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And so to paraphrase so far, I think 1.8 includes our retirement, what we pay in for individuals for retirement, for health insurance, for dental, for all of those type of benefits is all in the 1.8. This 350 increase is specifically around the health insurance piece,
Around
which
the
is
health insurance,
the biggest part.
That's
in
correct.
Retirement, your contribution to the our contribution
Right?
to the retirement is another line item we're going to see.
It comes out of this budget, but until the actuaries sit down and look at all of our staffing changes, as you know, that gets reassessed every year, so that
Yes.
comes through the retirement board. So until they do that work, we'd have to make a guess as to what that would be. That won't hit us until the following year.
You'll be guessing later. You'll be
We
coming
will
up
have
with
to
the
make
money.
it's a
Right.
fair point. It is a complex topic. So yes, that will adjust in future years. It's adjusted in past years. The actuaries do a complicated formula that looks at all the hiring,
Right.
retirement history, life assumptions about how long people live. There's a whole bunch of things that go into it. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can. Any other questions on the benefits? Okay, then I will move on to the last one, which is about capital improvement, and I may lean on the capital improvement chair to continue. I'll start. So we've got a couple specific projects that we did not fund in the fiscal year that we would fund as part of this. One of them is bridge maintenance, and so that's things like regular maintenance to the Farley Bridge, small things that we try to keep them up versus having full replacements like we're doing in a couple of the bridges right now. So some funding to be able to keep doing that. And then road improvements is some of the smaller culvert costs, catch basins, repairs and things like that that are not part of a road project for a specific area where we're doing a full complete streets and a holistic, large scale project. But we have specific needs and aren't, multi-$100,000 culvert replacements that we've got grants for, fortunately, so far. So it's some of the smaller stuff. So those are the two kind of road work, bridge work related ones. And then overall, $900,000 capital improvement capacity. And that, I'll let Ben expand on it, but basically pretty much all of the raise and appropriate capital capacity was reallocated at town meeting to the elementary school budget. So we don't have any continued funding that we can count on to continue to do capital investments in our assets, our buildings, improvements, et cetera. And historically, we've been, as a town, spending well over $1 million every year on capital projects for more than 5 years. It's actually been closer to like 1.3 to 1.5 million. So the capital planning committee looked at that, and then they also looked at what are all the things coming up. There's going to be fire trucks, there's going to be large expenses, and we need to have enough funding there to kind of be sustainable long term, not just for what's needed this year or next year. Ben, would you like to add to that, please?
Hello. Yeah, that was pretty good, Jake. The only thing that I would add is that over the last 5 years or so with the Capital Planning Committee, we've wanted to look at the capital budget from a short term and a long term. And it feels like over the last 5 years, we've really only been able to get to the short term. If we try to look at a longer term goal, something will pop up to be, $300,000, $400,000, and we've never put any money away for it because we're going on a year-to-year basis. By setting up the capacity to do this, we're setting this specific line item to be able to handle yearly and to be able to put money away for future or like a truck that would fire truck that would cost $800,000. If we were to take that in 1 year, it would wipe out the entire capital planning capacity. But if we were to put some money away over a couple of years because we knew it was coming in 4 or 5 years, this would give us the ability to know that 5 years or 10 years down the line, this is coming and we can put $50,000 or $100,000 away on it And when we get to the point where we can purchase it, we've already set the money aside for it.
Just add one more that was part of that is, I think, an important one to bring up is debt service. So we've been fortunate, a lot of the big projects we've done, we've got grant funding. But for example, the Arch Street force sewer main replacement is a borrowing. And so that has, that debt service behind it. And we think about and evaluate that as a capital cost. And so there are projects, we have multiple bridges, buildings, other things that are coming down the road that would be potentially multi-million-dollar projects, and the likelihood that we will save enough to fund all of that is probably wishful thinking. And instead, we want to make sure that part of what that capital funding would be is the capacity to have the debt service and to pay that debt every year, whether that's a couple $100,000 payment towards some 10 or 20-year loan that we've taken to do those projects. So that's another piece of the formula. I think if there's no specific questions on capital, the only other thing I wanted to add and speak to, and Mackenzie, if you want to add anything, please, is that you don't see anything specifically for the elementary school in here. And we had discussions with the school committee. All of us sat and talked about all of this, and not just the school budget. And at the moment, obviously, we don't know what we don't know coming forward. The significant increase that was included in the budget at the annual town meeting should be sufficient, we hope, in coming years. And that was a very large increase. And so part of where some of the deficits are that we're trying to address here. And so it's not that they weren't included or, we didn't look at it holistically. It's that funding already happened. So we're kind of looking at how do we balance all of it with this proposal.
School committee have that, have the lineup, well, you have a vote to create the reserve fund without any money in it. How does money get into that if we say yes? And my understanding is, and I missed the town meeting, it sounded exciting, but my understanding is that because of the cuts you asked all departments to make, because of the passion that happened on this floor, people found a way to fund. Now we're trying to put the puzzle back together. So, and a big chunk of that is, and God bless them, the children with special needs, state mandates certain things, and then we, small town, have to pay for it. Every town is dealing. So how does money get into this? And what is the hope to have that big, that it sort of pays for itself over time, that we're not having to take it out of highway department to pay a child support?
So that's precisely why we're creating this fund. It's a special fund that we are allowed to create as essentially a revolving account. And what we're allowed to do is take up to 2% of our budget, and the school budget, yep, and allocate it to this fund. And allow that to just build and build and build, and in the hopes that that would be where we would first go to if we had any of these unanticipated special education costs before we had to come back to the town and say, we have this huge cost, now we've got to figure out how to afford it. And so what we will do is as the spring, rolls on and we see where our budget is and we see if we have any extra in our budget, that will be what we allocate, up to 2% that goes into that fund. We would normally give it back to, return it to the town, but instead we're going to divert 2%, up to 2% of it for that fund every year. so that we can, much like the capital planning does, put aside. That's what we're going to try and do, so that we can help mitigate any future unanticipated special education costs.
Out of this year's budget be? If
So-
you had it left at the end of the year.
So we can put in up to 2% of our of our budget. I don't remember off the top of my head. Jen, do you remember?
So
What's the
It is-
secondary budget?
Yeah,
It
we're
is-
quickly doing the math. Hang on.
And just to clarify, while they're getting the number, it's also it's primary and secondary education. So it's not just the elementary
Ah.
school budget; it's also secondary.
Yep.
It does not include the technical or vocational school.
About
year?
$100,000.
A year? Wouldn't that
It's
It-
capped.
It,
It's
right. Right. So it caps at 2%. So we can't, like, we're not going to end up with an account that has $150 million in it, because you can't do that. But we can, every year, if we end up spending down, we can then replenish, so that we have that in there to help buffer against these unanticipated special
it's
education.
2%, so it's not 2% of every budget year.
Right.
It's 2% of the school's budget, maxed out, capped up.
Yep.
So you get 100,000.
Each year when the school department budget for primary and secondary is recalculated and approved by the voters,
Yeah.
it sets a new 2% cap that can go into that fund.
That's going to help, but we know it doesn't. So, I believe I read in the paper that there was movement in reference to our senator and our representatives working with the State House, try to figure out something where the state would come up with some money that would help towns support special needs, because it's gotten ridiculous for every town based on what the state, the people, the children deserve it, but do we know if the legislative delegation is still working on it?
We have a meeting with our senator next week, and we'll be asking on a whole host of topics, but that's certainly one of them.
They got a tough job, but
Absolutely.
don't let it die.
We won't.
But I would encourage anybody who is following this to certainly reach out to all of our representatives and support these bills to help us, because we are a small town, and while we are in a better position financially than some of our neighbors, it still hurts us just as much. So
Could I just
Quick question. I was
Could I
looking
just ask you
under
to
capital improvement capacity. Is any of that money allocated for the River Mill?
could I just ask you to state your name for the record? Yes, please.
So to expand on that, just more than a simple no, it is a totality of money that is going to be deposited into the capital stabilization account. What it's used for would be looked at by that capital planning committee and the select board and the finance committee annually. So that's not to say that some of those funds wouldn't be used in that future project that we're talking about. That's yet to be determined. So the hope for that line item is not that we're spending $900,000 annually. It's that we have that building up, and we'll be expending some and leaving some in reserves. But yeah, that could be part of it. Currently, we have still $600,000 in grant funds for IP mill demolition that we're trying to utilize. We're working with, we had one person send back some information on some interest in the building. So we're trying to look at all avenues still, rather than just blasting it out there and tearing it down, which is extremely expensive.
I understand that we all have a savings account and money investments and things personally, and I assume that the town does too. Our account, and we like to keep it. especially as we're a litigation and other things you need to pay for, and you never know what's going to come up. But you also said, so we know we're in pretty good shape, but we're increasing everybody's taxes again. And we all have a household budget that when we can't do something, then we don't do it, and then we save. And you also said that you met with the qualified staff of the school committee, town head departments, all across the board, asking them to look 5 years out. Fixing the problem we have now, I also thought I heard you say, we think we're going to be in good shape years to come. You can't predict the unpredictable, but there's a general increase in the cost of everything, pay raises and like that. But for the taxpayers, because we don't have any more industry to tax, not new stuff coming in, as we all know. Are we looking at what it, when in passing, excuse me, 12 days out of COVID, that we're going to be in pretty good shape if you were to get 2.5 override, get the number, that you're not coming back for the end of 2004 and 2005 asking for another 2.5 override. That's going to, that's just going to keep on picking up. That somehow we figure out a way to make.
So that exact conversation came up, and yes, our plan and our thought around this override is that it is not a 1-year override. If it were just a FY24 only, and we were just looking at what do we need to ensure that we have enough to finish out FY24, it would not be this number. This number represents trying to make sure that we can maintain levels of services as they grow throughout the next 5 years plus. That's the whole purpose of it.
And just to be clear, we don't expect to need, barring the unexpected, a 2.5 override. That doesn't mean it wouldn't increase taxes up to 2.5% each year, as is within the normal. We are assuming there will be some increase every year, but within the normal 2.5 limit.
So if there's no other questions on those, and you can, if there are more that come up in a few moments, that's fine. But just some clarity on that. Thank you, Jackie Boyden, for putting together the document, that the big blue document in the middle of that packet. It's the impact, because the one question that we always hear is, how much is it going to cost me? What is the impact going to be to the taxpayer, for both the residential taxpayer, for the commercial, industrial, personal property? All of those caveats are in here. Now, I want to be very clear. There's notations on there. There's disclaimers at the bottom. We do not have the tax rates and the values set for FY25 or 24 yet. So we are using FY23 numbers as a placeholder to show what the increases could be. These are estimated. Now, they're going to change as values in homes change, as those go up or down. It's going to fluctuate, as they do every single year. But this was the only placeholder we could find, is use the current numbers that we know. So this chart with all 22 lines in the big box there give a range of home values, assessed values, ranging from $150,000 all the way up to $2 million. So you could find approximately where your property is, whether it's a commercial, industrial, whether it's residential, and you can go across the lines A through K, and you can see the various impacts. And so if you're looking at just the increased change, we wanted to highlight those. Column D, column E, again in column I, and column K. And what those represent are, D is, if we do not do a 2.5 override, you're still going to see an increase in your tax bills. That happens every year. We all see it when the bill shows up. That's the estimated off the FY23 assessments. So if nothing changes, that would be our estimated increase that you can expect. If we do pass a Prop 2.5 override in the town, column E for residential and open space tax, that would be the impact annually over the current FY23 rates. So each household, depending on where you fall in the value of your home, that's what you would see. And then if you jump over, if you're somebody who owns commercial, industrial, or personal property in town, or if you have mixed use and you fall in some of those brackets, you'll see the increase in the tax bill of FY23 for that group of tax bracket. If we do nothing, if nothing passes, that's column I. And then if it does pass at both the special town meeting and the vote, the anticipated or estimated increase from FY23 tax bills for that group, which would be the commercial, industrial, and personal property, is column K. So if people are interested in the personal impact that they may feel that they'll see in their bills annually, that would be the increase from 23 to 24 if that passes, based on where your value is and what type of property you own in town. Absolutely. Thank you. And if I get any of these dates wrong, please, sorry, it's only Wednesday and it's been a long week already. So on the 18th, we will have a special town meeting. You've gotten the warrant sent home to you, you've seen it, you've read it. I know some people have brought it so they can reference it. Thank you. So there will be multiple votes, and that's not, the special town meeting is not solely related to the Proposition 2.5 override. There's other items on there that we need to do, other housekeeping items that are on there, general topics. But collectively, there's a group of those warrant articles that are related directly to the Proposition 2.5. So those are on there. We'll have that meeting on the 18th. Well, if the Proposition 2.5 in the dollar amount as it's presented on the STM of $1,831,000 passes, we have tentatively a vote set for the 19th. No, sorry, 23rd. So just a few days later, we will have a vote, and that vote is required by statute. That's the law related. Department of Labor Relations puts out a whole regulation about how you do a Proposition 2.5 override. It has to pass twice, both at a special town meeting and then again at a subsequent ballot vote, where the voters show up, just like we do at every other election. And that would be one question, and we would send that through, and if those both pass, then we will have the funding and we'll make the allocations and the changes and notify all the department heads and, you know, every department that needs to know. If either of those, I'll backtrack. If it doesn't pass at special town meeting, then the vote on the 23rd is irrelevant, and because you have to have a passing on both. If it's workable where it's changed, we cannot go forward with a vote with an amended amount on the 23rd. We would then have to repost for another date in the future, and it has to be, I think, 35 days because we have to have enough time to print new ballots, duly warn everybody, get it posted, send it out, all of the requirements that happen, you know, get legal to look at everything and all of those. So it takes about 35 days. So if there is any, if it's defeated, it's defeated. If it's passed but with amendments, that also delays the future potential vote and when that would happen. So I think I captured everything. So the 18th and the 23rd, tentatively right now, those are the two dates. Special town meeting, wait for the results, and then a vote following. That's, okay, it's 7, so it's 7 PM right here, and I hope to see a lot of people.
The-
Voting hours.
Yeah, the ballot vote on that following Monday is at Town Hall at normal voting hours, 10 to 8 p.m. And even if it doesn't pass or it passes amended, the total sum of articles that are related to the override, we can't cancel the ballot, the vote, so that's still going to happen. It's still going to, just be, we can't do anything about that. It just will not effectively do anything regardless of the outcome. So we'll still be planning another one if there's an amended amount.
My name's Mark Burnett. I just have some procedural clarifying questions. Thank you, Scott. That was really helpful, but then I feel like I got a little confused with Jake after that. So say there's an amended amount a week from today. That would mean that the ballot that was planned for the following Monday, I thought you said, Scott, it was canceled, but then I thought I understood.
So if I said canceled, I apologize. It has to happen procedurally. We don't have the authority. The state doesn't allow us to just cancel an election with any ballot. So we would notify residents that, it didn't pass that special town meeting. There are still going to be poll workers there. They're still going to take ballots. But regardless of whether it passes or fails at the vote, it's a fruitless act of casting your vote that day because it didn't pass at STM. So that's
And then you said another day.
and then we'll,
corrected.
if there's an amendment, or an amended amount, I think we've already set aside time that evening to then rework so we can shorten the timeline. We're not going to wait 2-3 more weeks to meet again. We're trying to do all of this in the manner that we are, and the reason why we really truncated it down to, about 4 months of trying to get this done is so that we haven't set the tax bills. We want to make sure that those go out in a timely manner like they always do, and so we're trying to really figure out where this lands first before we set that.
Another clarifying question for me, because there's multiple articles at special town meeting next week, I think I understood that whatever that amount is, I think it's 1,800,000. The ballot is just going to be one question. It would not be split up like the. Okay. All right. Thank you.
The ballot's just a yes or no. If
Just a yes. Thank you for bringing up earlier, because you answered one of my questions about if the school committee was involved. Because anyway, I was surprised to see that, so I'm happy to hear they were. And I just also want to clarify, the chairman made a statement that I think I agree with, that's how I understood it, I guess I'll say, not agree with, how I understood it, at annual town meeting, which was interesting. The school budget was passed, and I believe it was paid for out of the capital improvement capacity, I guess, for lack of a better word, for that line item. So to clarify for people, because some folks think that the school budget will actually revert back to fiscal 23, that it wouldn't include what was increased at town meeting. So I want to just make sure that's clarified for other people.
Yeah, for anybody that's questioning, no. So there's no reduction in any departments or any other budgets. They're all status quo. The only thing the 2.5 does is sees an increase to those areas that we felt were in a deficit.
Sure.
So no, there'd be no reverting back for any of the budgets.
Because I think I remember Chairman made a motion to fund some other things out of free cash at the annual town meeting, but that was not for school budget. I think that was to cover other things. Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification. And I think there's one other thing. And my apologies, we got here just a few minutes after 7. Did you, let's see, Article 2, I see some elected official salary increases. Did you talk about that before I got here? If so, I apologize. Just curious if there is an explanation of that.
Sure. No, we didn't talk to the STM articles outside of the ones related to the 1. Excuse me, the 1.8. But welcome the question. So when we put aside funding as part of the FY24 budget for wage adjustments, which was in progress at that time, we didn't have the final tables and everything set for non-union employees. The subsequent decisions on the wage table changes affected all non-elected personnel who were eligible. Elected officials' compensation is set by the voters, so even though we have the funding and we've changed the tables and that is the intent, is to adjust their rates, we can't do it without the approval of the voters. So the funding already exists. This is the voters requesting that the voters approve that change in compensation for those town employees who are part of the wage tables,
So it's,
who are elected.
it sounds like it's, I think you're saying more of a, for lack of a better way to say it, like a clerical issue, like this amount, I see I don't know, 14,000-ish, has already been, that was approved in this,
Correct.
but we just had to clarify how it was paid for with this article.
Correct. The voters have to approve increasing elected official pay,
Okay.
Formally, but the money is in the budget. It already exists today, regardless of the override.
Okay, so this would have happened at a special town meeting anyway, nothing to do.
Absolutely.
Very good. I think that's it for clarifying questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Sarah Vegaleros. Just was wondering if you could explain this page on the levy limit calculations. I just am not following the chart, and
Jackie, could we ask for your expertise here, please?
Oh, and I didn't introduce myself, Jackie Boyden. I'm the principal assessor for the town of Irving. Sarah, you're talking about this particular page? Oh, you're talking, okay. That is, yeah, that is the, I want to get the right page. It's the assessment and classification. Which one is it? I tried to come prepared tonight. So this is a copy of what our levy limit was for fiscal year 23. As Scott mentioned earlier, we haven't set the levy, we haven't set the rate for fiscal year 24, so I can't fill in any of the numbers for that. This was included to basically let you know that it was going to talk about the levy ceiling, because we anticipated a question that might come up that would be, how can you raise it over the 2.5? If the law says you can only raise it 2.5 plus new growth, how can you raise your taxes over that? And that's where the levy ceiling comes in. The levy ceiling is the maximum that a town can raise and appropriate forever. Okay, but that is based off of 2% of your equalized value, but the valuation of your community is. So that number does change every year because values change every year. So basically that was what that was for. So last year for fiscal year 23, and this is where the 2.5% gets calculated. In the one was how to calculate the fiscal 22 levy limit, and our levy limit was $11,707,406. And then, and I'm talking about fiscal year 23 because I was trying to give you an example of how it works. So that's the number that you start out with. And then if there's any new growth, and new growth is lot splits, new buildings, sheds, new personal property, that's considered new growth. And that is calculated by taking the valuation of the buildings and the land times the existing tax rate. So we never have a ton of new growth because we have a very low tax rate. So in other communities, when you see them with, 3 million or like $500,000 of new growth and all that, that's because they have a high tax rate. We have a low tax rate, so it doesn't matter if we have $1 million in new growth and valuation, it doesn't translate out to much in a new growth number. So then you would add the 2.5, which is basically 2.5 times that 11,707,406, and that gave you the 292,665. Then you add the new growth, which is the number I just talked about, and then that is your new levy limit with 2.5. That means that without a 2.5 override, that is the maximum amount a town can raise and appropriate. So for last year, it was $12,077,356. Now underneath that, in F, under how to calculate the limit, is the levy ceiling, which is the 24 million, the 24,514,049. That would be the maximum that we could raise and appropriate it if we wanted to. Of course, we're not asking for that much, but I wanted you to understand how you can raise above the 2.5. Does that answer your question, Sarah? Does anybody else have any questions about it?
Thank you, Jackie. Any other questions anyone has? Anything we can clarify? Well, no other questions. We didn't have any other business on our agenda tonight as a select board, and so if there's anything else any of the other committees would like to add or say before we wrap up for the night? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming out. I hope to see you next Wednesday at the STM, and hope you come out to vote the following Monday. Appreciate you coming out. Appreciate the questions and the good dialogue. Thank you all, and have a good night. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.